Hello, welcome back to another episode of I'm Not Triggered, the podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Purchase. I'm so glad you're here because today we're going to talk about emotions. We're going to talk about emotions like they're a wave in the ocean, and we're going to talk about how emotions are energy. We're going to talk about ways to discharge that emotional energy that are much more effective than maybe some of the ways that we use currently. Let's dive in. So before we dive into emotions and how they work, let's start with a fundamental question. What's an emotion? So emotions can be defined as energy in motion, which, is like dynamic neurobiological and psychological forces that are constantly flowing through our bodies and our minds in response to external and internal stimuli. It's a pretty broad and big definition, right? But we can simplify it a little bit by thinking of emotions as waves of energy. So emotions are transformations of energy that manifest as physiological changes, right? Or subjective experiences, or our impulses. Emotions have amplitude, which is a way to say that emotions always come with some intensity, whether it's little or big. And emotions follow a wave-like pattern, which we'll get into. Emotions, just like energy, can be transferred or redirected, but they cannot be suppressed and they cannot be destroyed. Emotions also require expression. They have to come out somehow. They'll come out somehow, whether we want them to or not. And just like I said before, right? Emotions cannot be destroyed. They can only be transformed. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They only change shape. So let's explore what happens in this emotion wave. But before we jump into the emotional waves, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you like and want to support my work. And of course, everything we talk about here today is in my newsletter, which is on SUBSTACK, and that link is down below. Let's keep moving. So if we think of our energy as naturally flowing through us like a wave in a predictable nature, right? That means that emotions have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the beginning is where this emotion starts to build inside of us. Sometimes we're aware of this happening, sometimes we are not. The middle is that peak where the emotion itself is highest, where the intensity is the most. And then, of course, there's the end, which is just the natural decline of the feeling that we're having. Now, the big takeaway here is that sometimes we don't allow ourselves to experience this full cycle of emotions. Instead, what we do is, especially me, if you're an addict, we love to do this. We love to try to interrupt that emotional wave, thinking that if we can stop it here before it gets to the peak, we won't have to worry about it, right? But as we'll see soon, we're going to find out that doing that only makes it only amplifies the intensity. So what's in this emotional wave? We get that there's emotional energy in this wave, right? But how do we deal with this emotional energy? Well, some ineffective coping skills are things like numbing behaviors. So alcohol, screen time, eating. We isolate, avoid, and withdraw. We self-harm or have suicidal ideation. We oversleep or don't sleep at all. And while these coping mechanisms provide temporary relief, they also set in motion a terrible cycle that makes emotions increasingly difficult to manage and regulate. And there's a real cost, right, to interrupting these waves. In the moment, we think that we're doing the best thing for ourselves so that we don't have to feel this emotion. But the cost of these interruptions come in the form of lowering our threshold to even deal with emotions in the first place. The cost is the emotions that come later will feel bigger and more overwhelming. We create a sense of identity that is, we are unable to tolerate our emotions. And interrupting our emotion cycle actually decreases our ability to handle actual life catastrophes. The emotion wave begins to become longer and look more like this as we continue to fuel it with thoughts about things that have happened in the past or things that might happen in the future. So if interrupting this emotional wave actually makes things worse over time, what do we do instead, right? Well, this is where, of course, DBT gives us a really powerful tool. And it's 4 steps. It's 4 steps. So this is the stop skill. So S is we pause, we stop what we're doing. We don't react. This allows us to create some space between response and stimuli. We take a deep breath. For T, we take a step back, either physically or mentally. And we can remind ourselves that we are not our emotions. The O is for observe. Here we can notice where we are in our wave of emotion currently. We can also observe our physical sensations in our bodies, right? We can identify the emotion by name, which helps dissipate any shame that we might have about this emotion. And then we can start to recognize the urges that we're having to escape the discomfort of having the emotion, which is a crucial step to increasing our resiliency. And with P here, we proceed mindfully. And this means that we make a conscious choice about how we move forward in this situation. We can consider what's going to serve us in this relationship best in the long term. We get to choose the most effective response instead of simply reacting to an emotion that we have. And then we can just take one small step forward with more awareness about ourselves and our emotions. Each time we practice this stop skill and allow ourselves to finish these emotional waves, we build these new pathways in our brain, these neural pathways for resilience. In long term, this means that our emotion waves are so much smaller. They still happen, but they're smaller with only occasional peaks. I hope that you got something useful out of this episode today. If you like the video, go ahead and hit subscribe and hit that bell so you know when I post every week. Check out my Substack for more information on the stop skill and how to ride our emotion wave. Thanks so much for joining me today. Till next time, take good care of yourself.